Good morning, everybody. I'm Pono. I use my Hawaiian name. I work at Software Freedom Conservancy as the community organizer. So I help our projects with public engagements. I help them do governance issues, community issues, fundraising, and all of the myriad issues that there are in nonprofit management. I've worked in free software for a little bit over a decade at some of the various FOSS foundations. In previous life, I was a site reliability engineer and a CI engineer. Now I've ended up working with people at the best foundation, Software Freedom Conservancy. So what is Software Freedom Conservancy? We're a 501c3 charity. We focus on ethical technology. And we've got three big branches of things that we focus on. Let me rewind a bit. We've got 7 employees. We're a remote organization. We are funded through grant funding, but mostly through individual contributors, people who want to support our mission. So the first big aspect of what we do is we're a fiscal sponsor for a bunch of really important free software projects. Git is one of them. Mercurial and Darks are 2 others. We also do non-version control software. OpenWRT, Coreboot, Inkscape, QEMU, PHPMyAdmin, Racket, which is a programming language. That's what I use to write these slides in. Selenium, Samba, Wine, and about 40 others. So as the fiscal sponsor, we're the legal home. So we can help with legal and trademark issues for projects, which is sort of a failing of free software where it's really hard to organize around those issues. Typically, those things cost a lot of money. So we can help projects deal with those kind of issues as they crop up. So I help with project governance and community and helping them spend money and raise money. Last year, we spent over $2.7 million paying for free software development for our projects. Any free software project is welcome to apply. Doesn't matter what license you use, copyleft or permissive, we're happy to talk to you. So you can get more information on our website about that. Sorry. Okay. So another big part of what we do at Software Freedom Conservancy is diversity and inclusion efforts. We've got a really exciting project called Outreachy, which is an internship program for historically excluded and underrepresented people in the technology space. After this session, Outreachy runs 2 sessions a year. We'll have completed over 900 total interns that have gone through the project. And many of them have bootstrapped their careers in FOSS through this. So the idea is that we get an intern paired up with a mentor and embedded in a free software community so that they can really learn what it's like to be a FOSS developer. There have been 7 Outreachy interns that have successfully come through the Git project. The last one was in December 2020. So we'd love to see more participation in that. This year is really exciting for Outreachy. We've got a bunch of open science and humanitarian projects. So there's a bunch of software in those fields, and we're really excited to see the expansion of scope for the organizations that are involved. So the last big part of what we do is license enforcement. So a law is only as good as the enforcement. And so we're the only organization currently enforcing licenses and making sure that companies who are using free and open source software are being bound by the conditions of the license that they've chosen to use. We've currently got a lawsuit against Visio, where we're seeking the source code for some of the copyleft code that's on the product. And this is sort of the first lawsuit of its type where we bought a Visio TV, and we're seeking the source code as an end user of that product. So this is called being a third-party beneficiary to a license. And this is sort of a new route that we're taking for GPL compliance. We're really excited about this case because we think that it really shines a light on consumer rights. Let's just take this off. Shines a light on consumer rights. And so we think that this is going to protect everybody who uses free software, and that's everybody in the world. So speaking of community, as a little example of some free software communities, there's the Vim and Emacs editors. And so what are they? They're both text editors, they both have CLI and GUI modes, and they both think they're the best. Last year, I switched to Emacs after using Vim for 15 years, and I use the Vim key bindings in Emacs, so people like to say I like to have my cake and eat it too. And I think that free software communities are often defined by their differences, unfortunately. What kind of licenses do you prefer? What are your views on proprietary software? How do you integrate your values into your community and organization? In most ways, I think that plurality of opinion really helps reinforce our strongest ideas, and our communities help us, in a trusted and respectful space, really explore the things we're not so sure about. I think the Git community really excels on having a variety of opinions, but a common technical goal which really binds the community together. Seeing the contributor summit yesterday, it was such a respectful meeting, and it gave me a lot of hope for the project, hearing the voices that were speaking up. So what are the commonalities in communities that bind them together? For instance, let's suppose that you're making a open hardware rice maker. Do you have ambitions besides making the best rice maker? What even is a best rice maker, and what are your criteria? Is it the cheapest? Is it the most easy to repair? Can it cook the most rice, different kinds of rice? And what lessons can you learn from the wider community? You probably aren't the first group of people to think about this problem, so what kind of research can you do looking into existing thoughts and historical information? I was writing these slides yesterday, and it was funny that during the Contributor Summit, an exact example of this came up, where it was brought up that Emacs has solved a problem with user configs and how you ship those around. And so I thought it was just a great example of how you can look to adjacent communities for information about your own. So how do we utilize our existing social networks to grow our communities to better respond to collective need? Not all software is for all people, but all people should have access to software. So we should be including all kinds of users in discussions around usability and other technical decisions. So who's Git's community? Obviously all of you here, the myriad folks around the world who develop and use Git, and the leadership that puts contributors and community first. The Contributor Summit was really cool to see all of the respect being paid to users that was sort of separate from developers. How are users going to respond to these changes? What even is a bug if all users are using a feature a certain way? I think that's an internal question. So Git has a project leadership committee. That's a lot of my involvement with the project. So they're representative of the community. And at the SFC, we really seek to make sure that there's no controlling interest by any singular company. That's really important because there are a lot of opaque interests and agendas that can be put forth against the best of the community interests. The PLC is also great for providing a sense of continuity for the project. There's been a member for over a decade, and Taylor's really new, and so it's great to see all of these plurality of opinion even amongst a small group of people. So how do we learn from the past generations while not being bound by the dogma? I think that it's some of the hallmark values of free and open source software that can lead to a strategy to deal with this. Transparency, remote and asynchronous communication, cross-organization collaboration is really novel, which means that community issues in open source software play out a little bit differently than how we imagine them. One of the other great things about the Git project is using open tools in communication. So asynchronous communication is done on mailing lists. There's IRC on LiberaChat. And the website is even in Git. And it's a real show of transparency and a commitment to community, and that's a really, really cool part. One of my favorite things about the Git website is that there's intro videos on how to use software. I don't know about all of you, but when I first started programming, all we had was documentation and RFCs, and if you didn't want to sit in front of a white screen all day, it was really hard to learn. So seeing videos as an alternative method of communication is really cool and inclusive way to present information. The fact that Git itself is open and building with open tools is absolutely incredible. Another thing I love about Git is that it's basically, at this point, a public utility. It's necessary to software development in the same way that electricity is necessary for daily life. It's really hard to imagine writing software without it. There's a piece by Mako called Free Software Needs Free Tools that was written years ago and has really shaped my thinking about how we construct the world that we want to live in, and that we really need to build our free software tooling with free software tools. Sometimes this is referred to as dog fooding, but I think a better metaphor is steel honing steel. So as has been the trend in the past 10 or 15 years, companies are realizing that participation in free and open source software is not just cost-effective to remove the invented here problem, but it's actually beneficial to grow and support the folks that are working around you and in your community. It gets you a better hiring pool, you get more diversity in your project, and a rising tide raises all boats. I also conceptualize free software infrastructure as desire paths. When infrastructure is not provided, we make our own. And we all have a say in what path becomes the ones that we take. We are building the future that we want. And luckily for us, the widespread nature of Git means that it'll never be owned or operated by a single entity, and we can continue using it in myriad different ways. Git's also built on the idea of decentralization. And that really, really changed the game. I think these days it's really hard to remember that we used to have CVS and centralized version control, and now everything is distributed. So, you know, first, and I couldn't believe this, but people would mail patches of magnetic tape by mail. That was how you moved software around. And then we got the internet, and we could use things like CVS, but it was still centralized checkouts. You needed somebody who kind of gate-kept the software, and that they had to make sure that you were the right person to check it out. And Git's decentralized model really, really changed things. Anyone could clone a repo, get entire access to the source code that would work offline. I mean, these days, you know, dependencies are a thing, but in general, you could do that. And we often forget that large portions of the world don't have easy access to the internet, and so this is a really incredible feature of the software. It also makes sure that you have tons of options. There's so many different front ends and back ends to use Git that you're not locked into any particular tool set. And that's part of the power of free software. So we need to make sure that we're instilling these ideas of decentralization into the tools that we build on top of Git, because otherwise we're just having a reversion to history and going back to CVS models. This also gives you the ability to migrate. There's tons of free and gratis and paid-for services that you can use to host your code and to collaborate with other people. And that's really great because we want to avoid walled gardens and trapping users and removing their freedoms. For more on this, you can check out our website. I think a common refrain in the technology field is that people want to just focus on the work and make something that's really, really cool. And that's not always how it works out. There are implications for the rest of the world when you make technical decisions. I think it's something that's really hard to wrap our heads around when we're just working on abstract data structures and other things like this. And so for a concrete example, I think that one of the best ones is the init default branch. This was a huge political issue that got people to talk from all over the world and consider what's important to them. I think changing the name from master to main was clearly a better choice, and it was really cool to see in the changelog that one of the blog posts my coworkers wrote were referenced in that. But this is the kind of political impact that we have, and our projects need to be more aware of as we move forward. We can't avoid participating in global issues. It's sort of the cost of decentralization and asking more people to help. So how do we build resilient systems that work for users, that respect our rights and that respect our rights? So what does the future of free software development look like? I think that Git and the Git community are a demonstration that we can, in fact, develop free software with free tools. We can grow and sustain a vibrant, shared space that connects us all. Even as continents, even across continents, we can focus on community, creating public infrastructure, decentralization principles, and embedding our values into our work. This is all to say that the free software movement is just like any other activist pursuit. It exists in nonlinear time, so we shouldn't think about moving forward or backwards. Social progress is not a directed acyclic graph. We need to constantly reflect on our history and allow ourselves the patience and creativity to create a different world. So thanks to all you for creating this incredible piece of software that models how to build the world we want to live in. Thank you.